Welcome to Not Just Money with your hosts, Doretta and Lee. This isn't your typical podcast about finances. It's a podcast about all the money conversations we aren't having, sometimes not even with ourselves. Join us on this journey of hard truths, lived experience, and the wisdom that comes from both. Because money is never just about money.
Welcome to Not Just Money with Doretta and Lee. I'm Doretta,
I'm Lee.
and today we're going to start our conversation about money, and not just money, with an exploration of saving.
What we mean by saving? Money you don't spend. It's not the money we didn't spend when purchasing on discount. It's actually money we set aside.
Purchasing on discount, you haven't saved money, you've spent money. You just spent maybe a little less than the price tag led you to believe it would cost. But for now, we're going to focus on the actual purpose, benefits, and ways of saving. So, most financial folks probably wouldn't start with saving. They probably start with things like net worth, budgeting, and self assessment. But you build something from a blueprint. You need to know what you're building to see the big picture. So, that's why we kind of thought a conversation about saving is a really good place to start. And I was thinking about reasons for this, and I think first of all, it's where most of us start. I mean, think about piggy banks when we're little. It's probably our first lesson of money. It was certainly my first lesson in money. Did you have a piggy bank?
I did not. That is a cultural difference, I think.
What would be the cultural equivalent?
Well, we would get red packets, and then our parents would put them into savings accounts for us. So at major holidays, birthdays, Lunar New Year, we get these red packets of money from everybody in our families who's married. So single adults don't actually have to give it out. There are rules around that. And then that's the money we would put aside and save, but we would never see that, not as children.
Yes. So you didn't see it, you wouldn't know how much you had or watch it grow and stuff like that?
We normally count how many bills we got, but we wouldn't necessarily understand that, like, 5 20s is the same as one $100 bill. So normally for us, it was like the number of bills that indicate how much money it was rather than actually the denomination.
I remember that so much from when my kids were little. You couldn't give one a $5 bill and the other one like 5 loonies because one got, or they didn't.
Five, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So therefore it was more. That concept, I think, comes a little bit later. Okay. So another one is that it's a foundational skill. It's one of those things that everything else depends on it. You can't build wealth if you can't accumulate some wealth first. I also think it's a really important habit. When you know how to save, then you can prepare for the future and you know how to weather storms. And finally, we're thinking we'll start with savings because once you've started that little bit of a journey and you come along with us on some of the other things, you're already going to have some skin in the game, even if you're just starting.
I think it's important for people to know that everyone can learn how to save. Starting is probably the hardest, but there's definitely a method to the madness. And don't get me wrong, saving is not easy. You always hear about people putting aside this and that, and you're like, well, why can't I do it? Everybody can. It's just the approach sometimes has to be different. And remember that everything in our lives is trying to get us to part with our money, to spend it.
Absolutely. It's like advertising, social media, people you pass in the street wearing you something you think is wonderful or carrying something you think was wonderful. And then there's the whole cultural aspect of being a good consumer. And don't underestimate the importance of that in that sort of subtle, just you grow up in a world where buying stuff is a good thing.
Yes, and then it creates all these barriers for you to invest in your future, which means to save for your future. And so when we break it down and we look at kind of the one reason that you haven't been able to save in many cases is that the missing piece here is to have something to save for. a lot of times if we don't define our future selves and what we need in the future, it's hard to say, I'm going to forgo something. And mostly it's something that we're spending on for something in the future that I don't have a definition for. I don't have a vision of. So let's start with this piece of value, because I think a lot of people will say, well, what is a value? Now, I personally believe that each of us has a fundamental value, and everything in our lives stems from this. So think about something that bothers you the most and something that you really cherish. So, as an example, my value is fairness, and everything I hate or love stems from this. So I'll give you an example. There is a large supermarket across the street from where I live. And after COVID, they installed huge security systems. Like every entrance has gates upon gates to prevent theft. And there was a period of time where, and it could be an issue with their system, whatever the case may be, but whatever was on sale, you would check out, it would be a different price. And so this went on, and every time I noticed it, I would be the person who waited in line at customer service to get my 53 cents back and to correct the system because I had the time. So I was very privileged to be able to wait in line for that extra 5-10 minutes to fight for my 53 cents and hopefully for everybody else who came and shopped after me. But it happens so frequently that it really bothered me. And so I went online, I dug deep in the supermarket website to find the comment page, and I wrote a scathing review of this system. So much so that the general manager of that supermarket called me, and I got on my soapbox and I gave him an entire lesson on how they invested these millions of dollars to prevent theft only to steal from their customers, because that's essentially what you're doing. If I'm buying a bag of avocados for $1.25 and I go check out and it's $2.25 because that was last week's price, you've taken a dollar from me. Because in my mind, I thought, oh, I bought it on sale, or on discount, I should say, rather than sale. And so that was a dollar I was going to save. I don't know, Doretta, what do you think your core value is?
Core value. It's funny, I've never thought of it as a single core value that way. I've always kind of had a little bunch of them that I guess they're sort of clustered around things like honesty and authenticity. But if I were to pick one, I think it would be safety. And that also has really deep roots for me because when I was a teenager, my father and my uncle died in a boating accident on a lake in rural Quebec. And the Mounties didn't find their bodies for several days, which meant that, my mother, my sister, and I, my aunts, all of us waiting and waiting and waiting. And it's probably the single most defining experience of my youth, and it really shaped everything, including my money mindset. So I have this kind of visceral understanding that bad things happen, and it's made me super conscious, super risk averse, and really doing all the right things to be safe and secure for myself, for my family, etc. It spills into everything, and I think it actually guides my approach to money.
But don't you think because you've identified that, you can ask yourself the question of, obviously, I carry that piece of me anytime I make a decision, financial or not. So if I'm making a decision and I'm super risk adverse, but I could, let's say, gain more financially from it, and I'm thinking investments on top of my head. Have you ever changed your perspective to say, I recognize that that's something that's important to me, but perhaps in this case, I can take a little bit more risk because I've recognized the fact that I'm very risk adverse, even to perhaps the detriment of my financials or
Yes. And
finances.
I think the thing is, yes, and the reason for that is a kind of like almost intellectual recognition that you can get good advice on this, and sometimes you have to give up a little bit of control and take the advice that you're given.
Yeah, but I think it's really important that you recognize that to be able to make that distinction when it matters.
Yeah.
So for me, fairness shapes my money mindset too. I know I can't participate in anything that isn't fair to all parties, even if it's to my benefit, it would ruin my sleep and it would really stress me out. And because I kind of have this fairness piece that's integral to me, I manage my family, my parents' money, because they know that I'm very clear on sending the money they want to send, receiving money, and leaving it in their account. They're never worried that I'm going to remove something and use it without their permission, as an example. And my family will joke about this, but I famously had one of my relatives sign a contract for a short-term loan, and I got skewered for it, right? Like, they're just like, "Wow, Lee, you're like the worst. We just needed a bridge loan." But then in the end, they loved it because, the terms and conditions were all laid out. Everyone knew what to expect. I never had to ask them any questions, harass them, or whatever. And I even gave them 3 months beyond that. But to say, okay, well, you said you're going to pay me back, so I'm going to take you at your word. Otherwise, you'll have to pay interest if it's 6 months or 3 months after the fact that you said you pay me back. But it actually gave everybody a peace of mind and it all really worked out in the end. But that gives you an example of some of the things that can happen within families for that. So from here, let's talk a little bit about goals. Is there a big dream? And that could be anything from travel fueled retirement or a big dream trip at some point or educational savings for your kids. That also helps to give you a goal in the future and to really save for that and to measure your success and your progress. Doretta, what were some of your money goals?
I think, looking back, there were the sort of traditional big three: a house, and that's very much tied to my need for safety and security, not as a status thing, but as an anchor, as something really solid and safe. My kids' education was really important because my husband and I both started out with a lot of student loans. So that was a really important goal for me. And saving for retirement. That was important because for most of our careers, my husband was always self-employed and I was mostly self-employed. So saving for retirement is really important because we didn't have company pensions or whatever. But I've been thinking about this, and before that, before all that, there was a really important short-term goal. And that was something that really helped me focus on like saving for something really hard that you had a very clear vision of, and that was a short-term travel goal. And I don't know whether this was just sort of more common back then, the sort of gap year idea, but we took a year off after our undergraduate degrees. We worked for 6 months and we saved every penny, and then we backpacked around Europe for 6 months. And the thing is, it was a life-changing experience. Like, that is something you always have those memories. And so once we paid off our house and had our kids' education and stuff, we actually went back to that goal and sort of put the whole work and save everything for retirement, put that totally on hold and went back to the travel idea because we realized how important that had been to us and that we wanted to be able to continue to do that. And so we just sort of made a decision that we wouldn't, work intensely and then retire and do our traveling then, but that we would include saving for travel and extend the period a little bit more. And so we had this kind of really tangible goal at the same time. So it makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it's important to also share and maybe like peel back a layer to your comment there that you're saving for a bigger goal. You're still spending that money, but just more targeted, right? Like if you're always spending every day, they're little bits, right? And you kind of death
Yeah.
by a thousand cuts versus think about how wonderful it was not to worry when you're on a trip to spend on that trip because you've already saved it. So you've prepaid that trip. That you don't have to worry about the debt that's waiting for you at home or your next credit card bill or your loan or whatever the case may be. And so really saving is about delaying your spend, but then spending it on something that really matters. And so when you get to that level of specificity, we call those SMART goals. So I'll break that down. They're specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, they're relevant, and they're time bound. And this is really important because it almost holds your feet to the fire in a way that not every dream is essentially a fantasy, that it is something you can realize. And I think Doretta gave such a wonderful example to say, hey, every year we're going to take a trip. This is our budget. Maybe this is where we want to go. They know how much that will cost, and then they can save up for it until they go on that trip. And it's a stress-free experience.
Yeah. And it's interesting, when I think about people, and I know lots of them who go on trips, spend the next year paying off that trip. I wonder if you really calculate just how much more that trip cost you because you're paying off the interest on credit cards and all that stuff. While by not going for a year, using that year to save, because my approach has always been I have almost everything possible prepaid before I leave. I think it's really important though to get back to the value aligned goals that we were talking about. You need to sort of put together the alignment with your values and the specific goals that you have to make sure that these are your goals, that the goals are aligned with your values and not something that your family or your friends or marketing or just the general sense of what your environment thinks is important, but rather that this is really aligned with your own values and that what is really important to you is shaping what you're doing. You know, there's a kind of, I don't know, I'm not sure this is actually a true story or just one of those stories, but the story is that in an MBA class, the professor is at the front of the room. I heard the story as a Harvard MBA class, and uh, he has a huge glass jar, and into this glass jar he puts a number of big rocks, and he fills the glass jar up with the big rocks, and then he says to the class, "So, is it full?" They say yes. And he goes, ah, ha, ha, ha. And then he starts putting in little pebbles. And the pebbles go in the glass jar. And then he says to the class, "Is it full now?" And they're starting to catch on. And a couple of them are kind of like, maybe. He pours sand into it. So is it, and the students are now really getting into this. He says, "So is it full now?" And they're like, "No, no, there's still more." And he pours water into it. So now he has this glass jar that has been filled to the point where even the water is overflowing. And he says to the class, "Okay, what's the lesson here?" And somebody puts their hand up and says that no matter how much time you think you have, you could always make more. There's always more things you can do. Find ways to do more. And everybody in the class is like cheering on this response. And the professor just kind of shakes his head and he says, "Yeah, no, that's not the lesson. The lesson is you need to put the big rocks in the jar first, or you will never get them in." It's just another way of saying that if we don't have our important goals lined up first, our time will just be eaten away by all the little stuff that prevents us from doing the things we really want to do and need to do in our souls.
If you think about sand and the sands of time and think about how that kind of whittles away over the course of your life, and how if you, again, don't put the big rocks in, then your whole life is just, it melts away kind of.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's a great thought to talk about kind of alignment from our values to our goals. And then I think you already touched upon this, but this whole idea about what's truly important to you. And I know we've heard it with the whole Marie Kondo piece, what sparks joy. I think that's the same in this case, right? Like what makes you happy as an individual, not again what society wants you to like or you think you should want, but what you actually need.
Yeah, I think one of the important things to remember is that our goals, a lot of our goals are not about money per se. And that's a bit of a truism, family, love, etc. But while we've got some goals that are about money per se, they actually require money. And so um, it's important to recognize that and get aligned and be prepared. So, a really extreme example of that might be family. That might be a really, really important goal for you. When you're thinking about budgeting, we know children are expensive and stuff, but what about fertility issues? Fertility issues are real. And for people who have delayed having children, they're actually becoming more and more and more common, and ongoing treatments can be unbelievably expensive. So that's a cost you have to think about. So the goal isn't measured by money, but money makes the dream possible. Another thing to think about is what's important to you. Do you really want this? Is it really part of your core values and your goals, or is it something that's been laid on top of you that you're expected to want?
I have so many examples where I've fallen into that trap. When my first big relationship blew up, I decided I'd revisit everything I thought brought me happiness, down to certain shows that we watched together. And I quickly realized I hated all of them because it was something we did as a couple, but I would never have liked them or even tried it if it wasn't for my partner at the time. And so I think it's also important to make a list and check in with those items and even checking into them every few years to say, hey, does that still spark joy? We change as we get older, we change as our circumstances change. And what's important to us in our 20s and our teens versus our 30s or 40s can be vastly different. Even if you have, a 10-year plan and, oh, well, when I get here, I'm going to have a destination wedding and that might all go away because it's no longer part of your goals or no more part of your values or just no longer important to you.
Yeah, I think it's important to actually take the time to write down your goals and order them, prioritize them from, what's most important to you. But checking in is really important. And you have to be honest with yourself from time to time because, as you say, goals change. And the last thing you want to do is have created this list and then be slave to the list, even when the things on the list don't bring you joy anymore.
Yeah, to say, hey, this is my list of success. But now at this stage, I don't really care about number 5 to 8, and so I'm still chasing something that brings me no happiness, and so when you get there and you think, "Well, I've made it," you haven't because you don't actually feel that about those things. So we've talked a little bit about that big dream and how we can define that through our values, what's important to us, making goals tied to our dreams. But the other piece that really prevents us from saving is our own psychology. And if we understand that, we can start removing the barriers to our success. So let's talk a little bit about some of those because we have to understand that, I'm very different from Doretta, from my neighbor, from my partner, from my child. So not everything works for everybody. And so you really kind of have to figure out, okay, well, what are some of my hangups? What are some of my weaknesses, we can say. And so the first one we always like to start with is, are you a saver or a spender? And that matters. And you can be honest, there is no wrong answer to this. It doesn't mean because you are a spender that you can't save. You just have to put different safeties in place as opposed to someone who naturally is a saver and doesn't like to spend. Because one of the other issues that you'll encounter is you'll save all this money and then are you really enjoying or living your best life, right? So there's always issues on both sides of that coin.
Yeah, I mean, you and I are both savers. For a long time, I used to think my only financial management skill was that I could save like nobody's business. If there was one thing I knew how to do, it was not spend money. And it comes from very, very different places, I think, for you and me. But the psychology is really interesting. I think the really important thing is to ask yourself why and start digging into it honestly.
We need to define this is so that we can actually put strategies in place that will help circumvent the issues that can arise when it comes to saving and spending. A common wisdom is pay yourself first.
Yeah, and what that means is basically decide how much you're going to save every month, every week, or every pay, whatever it is, and set that aside as a priority so that it kind of disappears, it's gone, you don't see that money. And that is a very, very common piece of wisdom that is shared with people. Social policies like pensions are based on this, Canada Pension, company pensions, etc. And it's pretty standard advice for your own personal finances that you just sort of set aside a specific percentage of savings. It comes automatically out of your paycheck, automatic withdrawal, whatever.
Especially if you're the sort of person who knows that if the money is there, I'm gonna spend it. You've heard these sayings where like, "Oh, that $10 bill was burning a hole in my pocket because I needed to buy candy or whatever as a child." But that doesn't work for everybody. Doretta shared her story about how safety, was so important to her based on some of the experiences she had growing up. I mean, for me, because I grew up in scarcity, just another fancy word for poverty here, is I never felt that I had enough in my bank account. And of course I'm a saver, so it's not as if I was spending the money. But what worked for me was actually waiting until the end of the month, paying off all my bills and getting my next paycheck in. And then whatever was the difference, I would save. I was still saving quite a bit, but I couldn't do it at the beginning of the month because I was terrified that I would move that money over, do something with it, maybe invest it, put it in something that, I couldn't access and I couldn't pay my bills. And that would have been a nightmare for me. And so I decided that I would do it at the end rather than the beginning. And that was because for me, there was that innate fear.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. I mean, it's all about really understanding who you are and what you've been through and what that means and the steps that you need to take to keep yourself feeling safe. I mean, as I said, my husband and I were both self-employed. So having that automatic savings was incredibly important because nobody was going to do that for us. So we had to do it for ourselves and we had to put that first. And it meant, holidays and things like that some years. That's just the way it was.
Yeah, but think about how stress-free that would have been. Sure, it would have been nice to go on a trip, but you're not staying awake at night going, "Man, I don't know how I'm gonna pay that bill," or how I'm going to afford to buy groceries for the week. I think one thing we'd all benefit from is just sitting with ourselves in silence. And I'm gonna say no phones, no distractions, and ask ourselves, and I'm gonna get kind of existential here, but what do we want out of this life? Who do we wanna be? Where do we wanna go? And it can't be frivolous spending every day. I can't imagine that anybody would see that as a goal of their lives, is just to own more stuff all the time, and whether or not that actually brings you real joy or sparks joy in your life. And then when you decide what's important to you, and maybe, hey, it's free. Not everything in life has to cost money. And then decide how you're gonna get there. Where am I today? And then where can I go from here, and how do I get to that goal?
Saving.
Thanks, Captain Obvious. I mean, yeah, you're right. Essentially, it's where we're obviously trying to get to. But, it's starting with that big picture, right? Without the destination, the roadmap is pointless. But with the destination, you can chart a course, you can track your progress, and you'll know when you've arrived.
Yeah. So right now, what we're going to ask you to think about is starting to save just a little bit regularly. But we can talk about what savings can truly accomplish first. There are so many benefits to saving, why you should save, even when it seems pointless because of inflation, etc. You can use all kinds of excuses for not saving and for not taking the responsibility for saving. These are, in a lot of ways, excuses that you tell yourself.
Living on less than you earn and saving the difference is the cornerstone of long-term financial success. It doesn't get easier than that.
Hey, that's Dickens, right? That's Dickens, right?
Exactly.
David Copperfield. It's the whole thing about Mr. Macabre is happiness is about spending less than you make. That's the key.
Exactly. And then once you tie that to something, you can work towards. That's when the magic happens, right? And the benefits aren't just financial, they are life changing. In fact, they make it possible for you to live a good life on your own terms. Think about that for a minute. Like, you're not going to be a slave to your financial situation, and you can build a happy life where you can thrive.
You know, if there are universal truths about money, that's one for sure. Did you know that thrive and thrift actually came from the same root word, which means to flourish and to prosper? It comes from Old High Norse. Remember, I did medieval studies for a while in university. Those Old High Norse knew what they were talking about.
I did not know that. That's pretty cool. And I think that gives a new spin on recycling. So you know what? So let's talk about the benefits of saving. I'll do the first one, fulfillment. It makes your big goals possible. Now remember what Doretta was talking about, the big rocks, prioritize things that are most important to you. What are you saving for? And research shows that it's easier to save for short-term things than long-term things.
Yeah. Like that's the first thing my husband and I saved for. 6 months of work to save for 6 months of travel.
For sure. And then you start with small wins. Maybe save for short term, see how that goes, and then make your goals and dreams bigger and more audacious.
Yeah, I think one thing that can be really helpful is to write down the things that make you truly happy, the things that bring you joy, and ask yourself how much they actually cost. And you might find that the most important things don't cost that much at all.
And also think about, the audience that you're with. My daughter's 4 and one of her friends, and they're a family that are all about big ticket events, right? Like huge festivals and bouncy castle playgrounds. And they're like, $50 a ticket. And of course, you as an adult, you have to take them. You also have to pay. Meanwhile, I'm like, my daughter is super happy playing in a free playground with maybe a couple of water spouts for the entire afternoon, and that is free, and I can even throw in $3 box of donuts to go for the kids, and I would have saved myself easily $95.
Yeah, yeah, it's like my blissful retirement mornings, just reading and writing in my favorite cafe with a cup of coffee. And you see, we're never going to tell people you have to give up your coffee. It's all about what really sparks joy for you. And for me, that time to myself, sitting in a cafe, that is my happy place to set up my day. It has been for years. It still brings me a real peace and calm. And I do not regret spending that money on coffee at all. So let's talk about another real benefit, and that is safety. Emergency expenses, job loss, or if you really hate the job that you have. I know people who call their emergency fund their FU fund for good reason.
Amen.
Yeah. And in this economy, it protects you from that constant worry that can feel like this buzz in your head that just never shuts off.
Yeah, no, 100%. Next one, avoid debt and borrowing costs, which can be crazy expensive. And it's so easy now. The amount of consumer credit extended to people is shocking.
You know, in some ways, regulation has curbed that bad ideas. But I'll tell you, back in the day, I once got an unsolicited credit card in the mail with a $20,000 limit. No wonder people got into trouble.
But the money traps are proliferating daily. Every time I spend over $100 on my credit card, it's like, would you like to pay this in installments? Or, interest only loans, HELOCs, that people use like bank accounts. I'm like, that's not what that's for. And I'll use an example. A couple of years ago, I think this was probably pre-COVID. I was buying something online. It was some generic cosmetic, and I was able to delay payment, and it said, "You can pay this total amount in 3 months interest free." And I didn't actually realize it was essentially get now, pay later. And I did it because I just thought, "Oh, well, that's great because then I can delay payment, time value of money, blah, blah, blah." But then you know what? I stressed about it every month. Like, "Oh, is it on my credit card yet? Oh, am I paying for it?" And it was like $50. And after that, I was like, forget it. That is not worth my peace of mind to think, okay, because I know that it's coming due and I had every intention of paying for it. And so delaying it by 3 months did not do well for my psychology.
I think another really important one, and you can't underestimate the importance of this, in fact, is the enormous burden that financial stress puts on our mental health. And just to give you some recent Canadian data, and this is from Canada.ca StatsCan, nearly half of Canadians say they're losing sleep because of financial worries. 1 out of 3 say they're short of money at the end of the month. And if you're dealing with financial stress, you are twice as likely to report poor overall health. You're 4 times as likely to suffer from sleep problems, headaches, and other illnesses. You're more likely to experience strain in your personal relationships. And the research shows that financial stress can lead to more serious health problems like heart disease, high blood pressure, depression, and anxiety. And another really obvious stat to look at it. It's really hard to ignore the implications. 68% of divorces in Canada have a financial stress component.
When you look at the statistics of just how much of a payday loan someone takes out, and that's really starting a vicious cycle of high interest payments and putting yourself further into debt, it's like $300. So put aside just $300 will alleviate a lot of that stress. And if any emergency comes up, you don't have to use really high interest taking loans to help you bridge that difference. And so that leads to the next piece, independence. Saving allows you to have your own resources, means that you can live your life by your own rules. And I'll use the example of my major breakup. We owned a condo together, and when we broke up, we had assets that we had to divvy up. And of course, the entire series of Star Trek TNG. It was quite serious. But because I had saved, I bought him out. And everything was wrapped up and tied with a bow in 2 weeks, and he was out of my life. I did give him the Star Trek series, just in case anybody is curious, because I thought it was fair. But because I had saved and I was a diligent saver, I could make that decision. And I didn't have to walk away, make different decisions, or maybe even live with someone I no longer loved.
Yeah, I think especially for women, never need a lifestyle that you can't afford to support on your own. It's all right to enjoy it, don't need it. Finally, I think the thing about saving is that it does set you up for the future. You will retire someday. Really, that will happen. So when you accumulate savings, that puts you in a much better position for an enjoyable, peaceful retirement. It also, and this one's really interesting because I never thought of this until I was actually interviewing a financial expert about this. He pointed out that when you live beneath your means and you're saving every month, you've also lowered the standard that you expect in retirement. The reality of retirement hits even harder because you don't have any more resources, nor do you have the income that will allow you to support borrowing to finance your retirement, your lifestyle.
And think about how sad that is when, you've worked your whole life and retirement is supposed to be a very relaxing and enjoyable time. And all you're worrying about is whether you'll run out of money or you'll have to live in poverty. I mean, that's so depressing as a thought. And sadly, we have large groups of seniors today that are really struggling because we didn't talk about money the way we talk about it now.
Right.
So we've covered quite a bit. We've talked about setting ourselves up with big goals and how do we define what we're saving for. We talked about benefits. The one of the challenges that we all face is this whole idea of the process of saving. It's like, oh, we should lose 5 pounds for our overall health and we should change what we eat. But what do we eat? Okay, like plant-based, whatever the case may be. You still need a plan on how you're going to get there, even though you know you should. Now, we know that because of how nuanced money can be, and we've covered how emotional our relationship to money can be, that it won't work for everyone, right? Being honest with yourself is that first step to figuring out what you need to do to achieve the dreams and goals you set out. But there are also a lot of hacks that are counterintuitive. But the trick is they keep you motivated and give you small wins to keep you going. We cannot understate that because there's this whole thing where like you have a savings account and you put away $5 a month or a week, but you also have debt. So most people will be like, well, you should pay off your debt first. And financial, knowledge and education will tell you you should. But psychologically, that hits you differently. That when you start saving and you can see those savings increase, it will increase the likelihood that you will save more and more consistently, which really is that magic trick here. Or also the idea of paying off the balance of your smallest credit card versus the debt with the higher interest rate. Because now maybe you had 5 credit cards you had to pay off. And so the one with the lowest you want to get rid of first, because then now you'll have four, even though that may not have been the one that cost you more. Like there's all sorts of psychological reasons that we do things. And it's not always to our financial benefit, but it is required for us to continue on this path and feel like we're accomplishing something rather than saying, okay, well, this is a deep pit I'm never getting out of. So why should I start digging? Who cares? Financial journeys follows us from the moment we know we need money to live to the day we pass. It is not something we can really ever ignore. So let's do a rapid round
where one of us will share an idea and the other provides a rapid response.
and let's start with easy saving.
Okay, I'm going to list savings ideas. And remember, not all of these will work for everybody, but we're betting some of them will work for you. And you give me the first thought that pops into your head.
Okay,
Okay,
go.
start small. Doesn't matter if it's as little as $5 a week. The point is to start and do it consistently.
Keep in mind extra bank fees. In theory, this is great, but all those individual transactions can add up. Instead, figure out what that lump sum is and do it when you get paid or at the end of the month, but you can do this math.
Keep it simple.
Research shows the more we spread around our savings, the more likely we are to overestimate how much we have. Like, oh my God, we have too many accounts and it's such a pain. And it also splits the savings and potentially investment strategies. It would also be a pain in estate planning, depending on how old you are. And can you imagine that list of assets? And over time, if there are fees, consolidation helps minimize all the fees that you pay.
Savings jars.
Wow, old school. Hard to do in a very digital world. Like, when's the last time I had a toonie in my hand? But could be really helpful as a visual reminder, like a little piggy bank on the side of your desk.
How about opening a high interest savings account and setting up automatic deposits?
Great starting point. And if the money is easy to access, could be a great place for like an emergency fund. Just limit how much you keep there. And when you look at an emergency fund, the rule is 6 months of hard living costs. Beyond that, you really need to look at how to make your money work for you in terms of investments.
Limit the number of credit cards you have.
Yeah, that's all about temptation. Like, you really shouldn't have more than two, a main one and a backup. Okay, maybe three if you belong to Costco or something. But it is easier to track your spending if you aren't opening 5 different apps to see how much you've spent on each card. And if you collect any points, it helps to consolidate your earnings.
Canceling subscriptions and memberships you aren't actually using and diverting that money into savings or debt repayment.
Okay, so subscriptions are the silent drains to your money. Sure, $20 doesn't seem like much, but if you don't use it, it would be like, I don't know, every month taking a $20 bill and throwing it out the window. And oh my gosh, worst is gym memberships. Like, always know yourself.
Ask your employer to divert a small amount into a savings account via payroll deduction.
This is a really good one. You should definitely talk to your HR department if you're starting a new role. And if you've never asked, do it today or tomorrow. Because if you do have a pension, either defined or contribution, those are the types, there could be ways you can top up. that leaves your paycheck and you never see it. And some payroll systems allows you to contribute to your RRSP, so that's your registered retirement savings plan. And the benefit is this is that it can actually lower your income taxes paid right away.
Okay. How about looking for a spending habit that no longer gives you any pleasure and stop it?
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes we can be on autopilot. I will out my husband here. Now, he will have a coffee at home and then grabs an espresso at the coffee shop at his work. And it became a ritual. I don't think he actually had any enjoyment out of it. But then the other day, I noticed that there was no coffee cost that was reoccurring on our account. And I asked him, and I said, "Are you no longer buying coffee?" And he's like, "No, I just stopped feeling it." I'm like, well, great. That's a $3.47 daily savings, but you gotta ask things that you do without thinking, and then wonder if that's just something you do because you have the muscle memory for, rather than something that you want.
And to be very clear, we are not suggesting anybody has to give that up because I'm not giving up my coffee at my little cafe. The point's to eliminate something that you do automatically but isn't giving you pleasure anymore.
Yes, and I'm sorry, Doretta, if that offended you, because we will never talk about the latte factor on this show, because anybody who knows Doretta will know that her latte is the one most important thing she will do in the day, and if it doesn't happen well, it ruins the rest of her day.
It does. It does. You know me. I don't talk to anybody but a barista before 10 o'clock. Okay. Last one, make saving a game.
Yeah, that's cute. I mean, challenge yourself. Your partner, your friend. Money doesn't have to be shameful or taboo. We should let our goals empower us. And I find that when you start talking about these and having these conversations with your friends and family, they're in the same place you are. And so not only are you helping yourself, but you could be helping a loved one too. Okay, now, Doretta, it's your turn for rapid fire round, but we're going to make it about making it harder to spend. Now, I'm going to list ways to curb spending, and you will give me the first thought that pops into your head.
Oh my God, I love this because if you're a spender, there is one concept I really want you to own, and that concept is friction. Friction is something that slows you down. So, for marketers, their goal in life is to eliminate friction. Everything that stands between your good sense and spending your money. And they do everything they can to eliminate friction. So it's as easy as possible for you to buy. The online one click purchase, sign up for a credit card on the spot, negotiate your car loan before you leave the dealership, on and on and on and on. But the thing is, you can turn that on its head and you can actually put all that friction right back into transactions to make it harder for you to spend and easier for you to save. So let's go.
All right. So, number one, understand the difference between needs and wants.
On the surface, that's really easy. Needs are necessary for survival and well being. Wants are the extras. You need a phone. You want the latest, fanciest model every year. Confusing them is how you fall into the trap of buying stuff you don't need with money you don't have to impress people you don't care about.
Words to live by. Okay. Next, take all the shopping apps off your phone.
Friction. That is pure friction. You can still go to the websites to shop, but it's that little bit slower.
Delete all credit card info online.
Friction. Again, this is a really, really good example of how you can slow yourself down, give yourself time to think about the purchase. It's kind of the digital equivalent of freezing your credit card in a block of ice, which, believe it or not, people really used to do.
Hilarious. Set up a separate email address for online shopping to minimize the temptation of promotional emails.
This is a really good one because I used to fall into this. If you sign up and you're buying something that you've thought through, you want online, and if you sign up, you get a 15% discount off your first purchase. I want a 15% discount off my first purchase, but the next thing you know, you get all these promotional things that tempt you to buy. So I just set up a separate email address for that, and I just don't look at that email.
Genius. I actually have to do that. Hide your phone wallet app so it takes you a while to find it.
Okay, that's the same friction principle. Another example, though honestly, I don't think this one would work for me. I could find it. I know how to search my apps.
Leave things in your online shopping cart to give yourself time to decide.
Yep, absolutely. 3-hour rule for little things, 24-hour rule for big things. At least you can make it longer than that if you want. It's about sober second thought. It's another kind of friction. And one of the tricks marketers use is urgency. Buy now, 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 now. And what you want to do is slow it down. And you will be amazed. I promise you how many times you go back and you decide you don't need that thing after all, or even wonder what the heck you were thinking about.
It's so true. So right now in my shopping cart online, I have books. It's a disease. I understand this. And all the time I have like 10 or 20 books that I think would be a good idea to buy, but then I realize I also still have 10 books by my nightstand that I haven't read yet. So yes, I 100% subscribe to this. Set low limits for daily and weekly spend on your Interact or credit cards.
This is a really good way to impose discipline on yourself. And there's a cold hard cash way to do that too, which is actually what I do, which is take out a set amount of cash at the beginning of the week, and when it's gone, it's gone. That's where my latte money is. But you can do it digitally as well, and I think it's a really good way to set limits for yourself.
Okay, no spend days.
I think this is a kind of game, and to see if you can do it. I really love it when my bank apps say you spent $0 yesterday.
How's that possible if you're getting a daily latte?
I have cash. I have cash.
Oh,
It
yes,
doesn't
I
come up,
remember.
right? Remember, I take
Okay.
my cash out at the beginning.
Yeah, okay, for those who are thinking about, "Well, if I spend cash, it's not really spending because it's already out of my bank account." Not true, you're still spending. Anyways, I'm just splitting hairs here. Okay. Call your stingiest friend and tell them about the purchase.
So this is a way to create accountability. If you are ashamed to admit to this purchase to your stingiest friend, it is probably a bad idea. Unless it really sparks enormous joy. Okay. Remember, that's always the caveat. If it sparks enormous joy, then you have to budget for it. Okay. But if you think about calling your friend in advance, it might actually prevent you from buying it. And if you buy and then call, be prepared to return it.
Oh man, so true. Okay, this next one is 100% me. Don't shop hungry.
There's actually research on this, believe it or not. People will spend up to 60% more on both food and non food items shopping when they're hungry. I'm not kidding you. The researchers figured that this has something to do with the fact that wanting to eat puts you into a mindset of acquiring and consuming. And it happens. Doesn't make sense? Happens totally.
Yeah, guilty, 100%. Last one, don't browse or look at shopping sites at the end of the day.
This is important. It's because when you're tired, fatigue hinders your ability to make good decisions. So there's a reason why people have gone bankrupt or turned into hoarders just by watching the late night shopping channels. Think about cutting back on browsing, period.
Yeah, there's nothing that
Just saying.
says, buy me now as you scroll through in the middle of the night. So, if you're listening, are there things we've left out? What have you done to make it easier for you to save? Write to us and let us know.
There are lots of ideas to get you started on saving because developing your ability to save is the underlying skill you need to be living your best life.
Look, the first step is always the hardest. The financial system tries to make it all seem so complicated, so we give up. What we need to do is block out all that noise. Start where we are. Ignore others. They're probably not doing as badly or as great as we think they are. We need to worry about what's in our power to control. Today, we challenge everyone to start saving now. Start small and keep it simple. That's it. The basics of building a habit and sticking with it. We are here for you.
And if you are already saving, great. We hope some of these hacks can help you up your savings game. So, Lee, 3 key learnings for today.
First, start with your own values. This is the biggest piece because that's probably preventing you from saving. looking at your own goals, your own dreams, and your own psychology. Be honest. We are who we are. There is no right or wrong answer on there. And we can either hide or let our bad habit run free, or we can adjust and manage our worst traits and turn them into strengths.
Number two, start small. Whether it's $5 a week or 500, just start. We're building a habit here, flexing a muscle, being consistent. Starting's the most important thing you can do. That and celebrate every milestone because it's not about austerity, it's about balance.
Ding, 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 ding. And finally, keep it simple. Do one thing. Don't get distracted. You don't need to do all 50 and get that one thing right and then move on to number 2.
That's it for today.
Good talk. You've been listening to Not Just Money with Doretta and Lee. Click on the show's description for links to resources related to today's conversation. Our aim is to share sources that provide objective information that can help you make informed financial decisions. Please rate and review our show. If you'd like to get in touch with us, email us at notjustmoneypodcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to be featured on the show, you can send us your questions and comments by a written email, audio file, or video file. Please include your name and city. This show is produced and edited by Lee, with original music by Leo Zhang cello and artwork by John Tu. Now for some legalese. Please note that the views expressed by our hosts and guests are theirs alone and should not be viewed as financial advice. This podcast is intended to be entertainment and educational in nature. Please seek additional professional support or information before acting on any podcast information. As always, good talk.